So I've just come to a bit of a stop and realized that I've got quite a dirty puncture. So figured it was a good time to make a video. We're gonna do a sound test at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around to hear it. Wait, let him pass.
Get out of it!
So I'm going to be answering some of the questions I've been asked a lot, but also some of the main talking points of this beautiful Triumph Speed Triple Double R while I am punctured. So as you guys know, I have a Yamaha MT07, which is a which is a completely different bike, completely different riding experience. A lot of the questions that I was asked, you lot are asking me to compare the two bikes, and they're almost in a completely different world, but I'll do my best. Has it altered my vision on trying more bikes? 150 million% yes. Before this bike, I was very much like, I've got my dream bike, I don't need anything else. But this bike has made me realize that there are different personalities and different styles to each bike, and I like who I am when I ride this, which makes me feel excited to try new bikes.
Is it a good bike for commuting / city riding?
So originally, I thought that it wasn't good for commuting and city riding, because one of the first things I did with this was a motorway trip. I lost my train of thought. One of the first things take two. One of the first things that I did was a motorway trip, and I thought that's what this bike was created for, motorway trips, twisties, track even. But I was wrong, because I actually feel very, very, very chilled on this at 20-30 miles an hour. Even though it feels like it wants to pick up and grab more speed, I think because the general vibe of this bike isn't as aggressive as I thought it was going to be, it makes it feel like you can just take your time with it. A little bit more so than the MT, which you just kind of feel like you want to be aggressive everywhere. Is it good for twisties? 100%. The lean on this bike, the way that it feels when you start going into a corner, it feels so planted and stable. And I feel like the power delivery is really smooth. Is it good for the track? Same thing like the twisties. I feel like it would be amazing just to be able to open it up. And it does have a track mode, which is cool. So you've got rain, road, sport, and then you've got track as well, which I haven't tried yet, I'll be honest. But I can imagine it makes it even more monstrous than it already is. So I haven't actually done a long distance on this. I have sat about 45 miles on a motorway. I've watched loads of reviews on this bike, and a lot of people say that after a few hours it starts to get really uncomfortable. Obviously there's the natural thing of you're leaning over, you're on your wrists a lot of the time, so naturally over time that would become very uncomfortable. I'm not sure about the seat, but from what I've ridden, it's really comfortable, and I've been okay. Do you know what I mean? Is it a good bike for noobs? It depends what kind of noobs we're talking. Have we never ridden a bike? Because in that case, I would stay away. The good thing about it though, if you're new to big engines or powerful bikes or even sports bikes, the rain mode actually allows like a bit of a delay in the throttle, and it's not as punchy and it doesn't come through as fast. So if you are just beginning or you're trying to figure out this style of bike, it's nice to have the option to put it in an easier mode where you have a bit more of a forgiving throttle, because as you go up in the modes, it starts to get more punchy with every twist. I always thought that I don't like tech on bikes. One of the reasons why I got the MT07 and why I wanted it was because there was no fancy electronics on it. Perks of filming outside.
Kim DP.
One of the reasons why I got the MT07 was because it didn't come with a whole load of fancy electronics other than ABS, which comes standard, but it didn't have modes, it didn't have traction control. And so I thought when it came to fancy modes and things, I wouldn't like it, but it's turned out to be quite nice actually.
It's quite nice actually.
Quite nice actually. It has ABS, it has traction control, it has wheelie control. So if you want to pin the throttle, it's not going to lift, or even if it does lift, it will just be ever so slight. It has different modes, it has suspension adjustment, and it has cruise control, which is phenomenal because because you are leant over on your wrist the entire time, if you do want a break and you're going down the motorway or you're going down an A road where there's average speed, you just whack it in cruise control, sit up and just let your hands relax a little bit. Another amazing thing about this bike is that it comes stock with a quick shifter up and down, and heated grips, which work beautifully. There's 3 different setting options for the heated grips. You've got hot, 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 then you've got hot, hot, and then you've got just hot. So the biggest comparison with the MT07, if you take away the fact that this is a sports bike, that's a naked, this is a 1200cc, that's a 700cc, and that they're completely different bikes, if we're just judging off of how the bike feels and the personality you have when you're riding, this makes me feel a lot calmer. And I think it's partially to do with the fact that it's got so much power that, you know, when you need it, it's just there. So you don't feel as aggressive as you do on something like that, where you just want to kind of blip the throttle constantly and just push it through to its max. The riding position on this is okay. Obviously you are leant over, but still not as much as a really aggressive super sports, because this is still made for the road, so it is a little bit less aggressive. But the one pet peeve I have with positions like this is, as you're hunched over, doing shoulder checks is almost impossible. You really have to move your hand out the way and move your whole body, which is stressful. I've nearly been taken out a couple times by now because I can't see, especially because my helmet doesn't allow for a good peripheral vision, so it stops at about halfway. I had an AG view before and I could see a lot more through that helmet. But that's just my number one pet peeve about being in this position, is the fact that you can't move your head over your shoulder easily to see what's coming behind you. So the styling is beautiful. I love the side of the bike. If you cut out from this bit all the way down to the end, the bike is beautiful. It looks savage, it looks aggressive. But then when you come around to the front of the bike, I'm not as much of a fan of the headlight. We've literally just had somebody pull over, say that they want to check out the bike because they love the front end. So I feel like it really is a matter of preference. I remember when the MT little circle headlight came out. When that first came out, everybody was going crazy because nobody liked the circle headlight, but I loved it. So it's one of those things where it's down to preference. I'm just not a fan of this on a sports bike because I feel like it takes away from its like aggressive feel, and that's what most people do like about sports bikes. So if we could just kind of point in the nose out a little bit, I think it would be a lot more my style.
She's talking
Horsepower!
She's talking to herself like, what a twat, I heard her say.
Is it worth the money? This bike comes in at about 18k. Give or take the color scheme, I think it's just under if you get the white, just over if you get this beautiful red with the two-tone black. It's not an expensive bike for what it is, especially because so many things come stock in this bike. Like I said, the quick shifter up and down, the Brembo brakes, the carbon touches, the fact that it's a 1200cc, like it is 100% worth the money. Would I buy one? I feel bad saying I wouldn't buy one though.
Why?
No, probably not. Just because I think this doesn't necessarily match my personality. I think if I was going to buy a sports bike, this would be one of the top 3 that I'd consider, just because it's not as leany over and aggressive as a lot of other sports bikes that are out there. But just me in general, I don't think that I see myself on a sports bike, like owning one. I have a bit of a wrist injury, so that doesn't help. But even then, it's just maybe I'd own it as a 2nd or 3rd bike, just because it would be nice to take it out on twisties or do motorway riding with it, or if I went abroad with a bike, I would definitely prefer to take something like this over the MT07. But other than that, I just don't think it really suits me as a rider. So that's probably the main reason why I wouldn't buy one. So one thing that's kind of annoying, and I don't think it's specific to Triumph, I think it's specific to these bikes in general, is that you'll position your mirrors in a certain type of way for when you're doing normal road riding, but as soon as you flip onto the motorway and you start tucking into the bike a little bit more to tuck under the shield, or if you want to pick up speed, you can't see anything in your mirrors, and then you have to readjust them, which becomes a problem when you're doing sort of 80 miles an hour and you're trying to lift one hand over and pull it over and try and adjust both. So that's just a little bit of a annoying point, but that's not specific to Triumph, that's just any sports bike. I don't know if there's a cure for that. Maybe electronic mirrors where you could pinpoint 2 positions that you like them in, and then you could just switch into your 2nd position. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but it would be nice if they could come up with some type of solution for that. I'm not sure if it does, but the mirrors help with downforce, so they're very slick, which just allows air to travel. So this bike is actually keyless, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I do like not having to faff around with it, trying to get it in and out, because mine always gets jammed where it's positioned. So if you come round, you can see, just with the key in my pocket, if I switch the display on, it comes up with a pretty little message, although it is a little bit slow. The key does come with a button, so you can press this little button, it will turn off the connection, press it back on. When it goes green, the connection's back on. So if you are going to be near the bike and you're a little bit paranoid, you're a little bit paranoid about somebody just coming along and switching it on, you can just disconnect the key, so that's pretty good. And it's not like on the Yamaha NMAXs, once you disconnect the key, it takes forever for the key to find the connection of the bike again. So I used to tell people all the time, don't bother switching off your key, but this one works beautifully and I haven't had any problems with it yet, so that's a good point. One of the things that I struggle with a lot is the fact that I've got tiny little hands, and when I'm holding if you come take a look, when I'm holding the handlebars in the position that I like to, I can't actually reach any of the buttons with my thumb. So a lot of the time I have to lift my hand off to be able to play around with the buttons, and that goes for the throttle hand as well. But obviously you don't really need to use these buttons very often while you're riding unless you want to hit the hazard lights, but it's just not ideal. But then again, there's nothing that they can do about that. That's just a me problem because I've got little hands. That's why I usually get long nails, because the nails can reach the buttons. Another thing I want to mention is the height. So I'm 5'5", and when actually it's not a good indicator right now because I've got a flat tire, so we'll come back to that one. RAC have just turned up, so we'll be right back. We fixed it. Bye. We're fixed. One thing I forgot to say about the specs, have a look. Gold Olin front forks, Brembo brakes, standard. And if you take a look at the back, we've got Olin's rear suspension as well. Adjustable rear suspension. So one thing I want to mention, yeah, because I'm not short, but I'm short for bikes. I'm 5'5". What?
Sorry, I was whispering 4'2".
Why do I keep saying one thing I forgot to add? Everything's gonna start like that. Okay, so I'm 5'5", and of all the reviews I've seen, I don't see anybody mentioning how this is for short people. I'm used to my MT, which is a little bit lower than this, where I'm already tiptoeing, so I'm already used to the feel of being on my tiptoes and not being able to flat foot. There's a huge van coming. But on this one, I don't know the seat height. I'll insert it when I do the editing, but when it's over on its stand, I'm completely dangly legged, and then I'm flat foot on this side. But if I stand it upright, I am on my tippiest of toes. So is it ideal? I want to say for me, yeah, because I actually feel, because I'm so used to being on my toes, I actually don't feel right when I'm flat footing. So for me it's fine, but for a more maybe nervous person, it's not ideal, because the seat is quite thick. But obviously if you want to be flat footing, that's how, oh my god, I'm going to drop it. That's how far over the bike needs to go. And my heel is still off the ground. So plus, can I just add that these crusty ass trainers, they have a pretty thick sole. So when I'm in my Converses or something, I'm even more upright. So definitely get some boots or some shoes with a thick sole if you're going to be riding this around and you're any shorter than I am. I know there's a lot of short riders out there who can handle sort of switching between one leg, but I think it's compulsory for me to be able to get both toes down at the very least, because when I want to walk the bike, one of those walks, when you're kind of pushing it around. I'm on a slight hill, so I can't get it up. One negative is the side stand. If you see, I'm standing upright, and that's the difference of the lean with the side stand down. To me, that is not comfortable. If you've got even a slight incline, does that make sense?
Hill.
If you're even on a slight hill, that is bouncing back up. I really struggled on a driveway, which wasn't even a hill. It was just like a little baby bump. And I really struggled with it. I feel scared when I'm getting off and I have to do it really slowly. Another negative is that the screen takes so long to start up that you're almost just sitting there when you're ready to go. You're just sitting there like, come on, hurry up. You can switch the bike, you can start the bike and like before the screen is all the way on, but it just doesn't feel right. You want to wait for it to all load up and then, yeah, it's just really delayed and really slow. So that's not great. The final negative that I've got is finding neutral on this bike. It is a pain in the backside. I saw people reviewing that on YouTube and I thought, oh, I can't be that bad until I tried it myself. I have learned that if you've got the bike on, it's a little bit easier to get into neutral, but you still have that moment where it's like going between 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 for a little while. But when the bike's off, it's like, the longest time it took me, I timed it because it was on my GoPro, was 4.5 minutes. Like that is a long time to be sitting going between gears. And before anyone says anything, it's not me, okay, because I've ridden other bikes and I know how to put a bike into neutral and I have very delicate feet and you're pushing it ever so slightly, but no matter how much you put on it, it still just goes all the way up to second and then all the way back down into first, which is a little bit annoying because when you get to traffic lights, you want to just be able to whack it in neutral so you can sit up, stretch your back out and do what you're doing, which is sometimes impossible because by the time you found neutral, the light's turning green and you've got to go again. But when it does hit neutral, it's lovely and you can relax. So the steering lock is a little bit funky because obviously it's keyless. So you got to press this button and nothing happens.
Because it's been off.
Have I got the key?
Yeah, it's been off.
Yeah, so you just press a button, it makes a little noise and then it's locked or unlocked depending on which way you're going. Is top speed relevant to me? No, not at all. What's the point? Unless you're doing track riding and you're racing, then yeah, okay, maybe it's relevant to you, maybe it's important. But for me, not really. I'm 9 times out of 10 riding through the city, and when I'm not, I'm going on a motorway or I'm going through twisties. So the maximum speed I really need is about 80 miles per hour. Obviously, it's nice to have access to more if you need it, which is illegal on UK roads. But I'm not a person that really enjoys going super fast. Even though you've got the screen, which is meant to help, I was still being insanely battered by winds when I went on the motorway with it. It is obviously better than the MT because I feel like with the MT, the wind just pushes your shoulders back and you feel like you're trying to hold on and it gets really sore after a while. With this one, you can tuck in, but there's still that wind. Like this isn't really making that much difference because it's quite low. So yeah, I'm just not really a person that craves speed anyway, so for me it doesn't really matter. Will I be testing the street triple? I do have another bike lined up for March when I hand this one back. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's not the street triple.
Does it go brap?
It goes brap brap. It's very quiet, and that's the thing, you need an exhaust on these bikes because it sounds beautiful but you can't hear it. And what's that saying? Loud pipes save lives. I feel like it really needs an exhaust just for safety purposes when you're going through traffic. It's so quiet. Would I choose it over my MT? When I got this question, I was like, oh, that's a good question. But then on pondering it a little bit, I realized, you know, it's a pretty easy one. No, I wouldn't choose it over my MT. But this definitely has qualities to it that my MT does not. And it really kind of took away the feel of the MT for me. When I jumped back on it, I was like, where's the power? And that used to feel so powerful to me. So no, I wouldn't choose it over my MT, but is the MT still my dream bike? I don't think so.
It's a guy riding a horse, but it's a bicycle.
So the riding position is very what you'd expect. The riding position is kind of what you'd expect, but it's a bit more upright. I know girls love to sit all the way back here so they can pop their booty out, but if you are sitting quite comfortably, then it is still a lot more upright than a lot of sports bikes, so it is quite decent. And does it hurt my back? No, because my back is pretty straight. It's more just the wrists. You can give yourself a relief by kind of tensing your core and letting your weight rest on your center, but that's not feasible for a long time. So yeah, it is comfortable, but would I want to do forever distances on it? No, because the wrist pain is real. Let's do a sound test. So we're switching it on, waiting for it to load up. Takes its time. Moto Vixen. Once it's on, we pull the clutch in. Nothing beats the sound of the shift though. Thank you for watching the video. I hope it was kind of helpful in helping you decide whether you want to go for one of these. Left it on. I'm going to be doing a pros versus cons of the bike in the next video, so make sure you stick around if you're interested. Now that my puncture has been fitted, I am going to make my way back home. Now that my puncture has been fixed, I am going to make my way back home. I'm going to leave that flopping. I'm gonna make my way back home, but we'll get a couple of nice shots of the bike and see you in the next one.